All right, hi everyone. We're going to get started just because we know that we're running long on time to begin with, and it's already 9:04. Today we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and augmented reality in museums. My name is Rachel Boesenberg. I'm assistant curator at the Anchorage Museum. AR, AI, really just tech in general is not my thing, but it's something that my colleague Alex and I have been talking about a lot, so we're excited to share with you today.
My name is Alex Taitt. I'm an assistant curator at the Anchorage Museum, specializing in digital content and programs. Digital technologies is my thing. I am really interested in that and finding that integration between museums and technology. Outside of work, I'm also a PhD student here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks in the Arctic and Northern Studies Department, studying digital heritage preservation. So some of that work will come up in this as well.
So I'm going to do a wide leg stance so that I don't have to bend down. Microphone. Our session today is 9 to 10 a.m. We're hoping that we'll do all of our talking at you for about 40 minutes, and then we're going to transition to a Q&A and a live, not even demonstration, but like a live playing around with the technology. So we have some iPads here and some examples of exhibitions and installations that are at the Anchorage Museum right now. Artificial intelligence, also known as AI and augmented reality, AR, are new technologies that really can be intimidating at first, but they can be really helpful in the museum space. So today we're going to talk about both of them, how they can be applied in Alaska museums, some suggested approaches, practical tools, and ethical concerns based on Alex's research at UAF when you're considering which artwork or cultural belongings to augment in your museum. We'll share a few case studies to demonstrate efforts that are happening at the Anchorage Museum, and also what we're doing to incorporate AI into workflows at the museum. We hope that the following overview will be helpful to keep in mind as you consider what's doable and scalable at your own cultural institution. As I said before, I am by no means an expert. It's something that we've been talking about more and more in the context of museums and also day-to-day conversations as technology advances. It's clear that AI is not a passing trend, but something that's here to stay, whether it's in the professional or personal realms, from utilizing it as a research tool to asking AI to suggest an itinerary for your next trip. Somebody told me they did that this summer and they got a suggested itinerary for their trip to Alaska. And then I was like, no, you want to do this, this, and this also. So we are going to dive in and we'll also talk about things that sometimes don't always go well.
So today we'll talk about AI, artificial intelligence, AR, augmented reality, and VR, virtual reality. We will explain the difference between AR and VR, but we're mostly going to focus on AI and AR for this presentation. So we'll try to stay the full term as much as possible, but we've also added this little banner at the bottom. So if we're saying these acronyms and you're not quite following, hopefully you can use that as a guide. Our objectives for this presentation are to give an overview of each technology, share some practical applications in museums and other cultural institutions, examples of what we're currently doing, what we've seen at other museums, talk about ethical considerations. And the goal is to make these technologies seem more approachable. It's not out of reach. You don't need to have a lot of money to make these things come to life at your institution. So lots of examples to share that can be used at any scale. And we're looking at the easy options where you don't really have to have a really heavy coding background that you can just kind of pick up and learn on the go.
I had some animations in here, but I guess they've gone away. That's okay. So we are going to start off going over what AI is, artificial intelligence. So broadly, it's any technology that enables computers or machines to mimic human intelligence and learning. It's a computer system that can perform complex tasks that traditionally it was thought only humans could do, such as language processing, problem solving, or decision making. And as these technologies develop, AI is becoming increasingly more sophisticated and creative. Some examples of what AI could do for you It recognizes faces, it understands speech, it drives cars, it writes sentences, it answers questions, and it can create pictures. There are so many different ways that it's applied, and today we're going to focus on generative AI. We're also figuring out how to do the two-screen thing. Thank you. Okay, generative AI, which is also known as Gen AI, can create original long-form text, high-quality images, realistic videos, and other content in response to a user's prompt or request. The super simplified explanation of how this works is that generative AI is essentially trained to review a ton of websites, books, information that's out there, and it creates a model that anticipates what the next word will be. So if I say something like, oops, we didn't put our examples in here, the grass is always greener on the other side, it's because you've heard that so often, you know that that's likely to be the end of the phrase, and AI works in a similar manner. It's essentially a set of algorithms or rules or instructions that guide AI to review billions of options, and then it generates content in response to a user's prompt. We want to make it clear, it's not the machine thinking critically, it's the machine going through a set of procedures. And then once that foundational model is created for knowledge base, there is extensive tuning to adapt the model so that it performs better, it removes bias as much as possible, and it functions as an application with general knowledge. So, wow, click, that image shows up on the right, how exciting. ChatGPT is probably the most recognizable to folks out there right now, and you can see down at the bottom, it says ChatGPT 5 days. That is the pickup for 1 million users for new technology. So that is impressive compared to Netflix, which took 3.5 years, or Instagram, which took 2.5 months. And yes, if we look at these dates, ChatGPT is much more recent at 2022 compared to the earlier ones, which the more recent is 2010. So there are more people that are using technology at this point, but it's still a huge pickup for a new technology. It was launched in November of 2022, ChatGPT was, and by January 2023, it had 100 million active monthly global users. This sounds dramatic, it's already disrupting whole industries. We know tech people love to disrupt. It competes with artists, with writers, and with other content creators. And Goldman Sachs estimates that there are 300 million current jobs that are at risk of being automated by AI. We thought this was funny. Here's a moment of levity after that scary number. The biggest problem with pushing all things AI, the wrong direction. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes.
I agree.
So, we're sharing this not to scare everyone, but just to have a reality check. This is here to stay, and AI and technology are going to continually become more integrated into our day-to-day professional and personal lives. In fact, I bet most of us probably already use it. Has anyone used Google search? A search engine uses AI. If you use Siri or Alexa on your phone, or the Alexa little pod thing that you can have in your home, that is AI. If you watch Hulu or other streaming services and it recommends what to watch next, that's also an algorithm that's looking at what you've done and suggesting what could be related to your viewing choices. And if you have a fancy new iPhone that has Face ID, facial recognition software, is also AI. So why is it important for us to talk about today in the context of museums? Your institution should absolutely have an AI policy, which we'll talk about later. On the HR and resume building side of things, it's believed that prompt engineering, which is writing those prompts and getting the correct content out of AI, is going to be a required skill, kind of like how Microsoft Office is often listed under requirements on job applications. And eventually it could become an entire job role in and of itself as AI continues to have a presence. And feeling a little cheeky, I feel like Lisa kind of stole our thunder when she did a lot of ChatGPT yesterday. But feeling cheeky, before we saw Lisa's presentation, we decided that we would ask ChatGPT why AI matters in museums. And this is the response that it shot out for us. We should also say our entire presentation was not written by ChatGPT. It was months of chatting back and forth in our offices. So as you can see, there are a ton of things. I'm not going to go over them right now. They're all very relevant, but as Lisa also pointed out yesterday, there are issues, there are problems, there is bias that is inherent to any machine prepared response to a question. So we'll go over some of these and we'll also talk about practical problems that you're likely to encounter as you install these type of interactives in your galleries, such as how do you charge an iPad if you're providing that for your visitors? I'm going to pass it over to Alex now.
Right, so AR and VR, they both alter our realities in some way. So there's a spectrum where virtual reality is on one end where it's completely immersive, it's a built environment, and then on the other side of the spectrum, you're experiencing reality, right? What we're living in right now. And then somewhere in the middle is augmented reality, where you're overlaying these different technological filters on your everyday life. So at a most basic level, augmented reality, demonstrated by this cartoon, alters the world we're in by adding digital images to what we're seeing and experiencing. It's usually done through a smartphone, but virtual reality, which is the character on the right, creates a fully immersive experience that users can navigate through, and it typically uses a headset or something that's more encompassing of your body. So virtual reality places the user in an entirely different but built digital world. It's computer generated, a three-dimensional environment that simulates a virtual reality. Scenes and objects that appear to be real make the user feel that they're immersed in their surroundings. You see this most often in video games, but there are also examples you can see in educational settings, in entertainment and in museums. But the kicker is you have to have these headsets with goggles. There's a helmet you can have a helmet with a screen inside, or gloves that will track your movements to relay that into the real world or into that virtual world. But it allows the user to interact in these immersive virtual worlds in a way that feels physically and visually realistic. And augmented reality, on the other hand, alters the world we're in by applying these virtual layers that we're seeing and experiencing, integrating that digital information with the user's environment in a real-time scenario through a smartphone or a tablet, usually. These animations are superimposed onto the world you see through the camera iPad, or your camera and iPad, or some sort of tablet. You can animate an object, add color to it, show characters moving around, place it in a different scene. There are a lot of options there. So by superimposing those images onto the world around us, AR creates a sort of mixed reality that melds our real environment with this additional information. So it is interactive, just like virtual reality. What sets it apart is that it's enhancing the world around us rather than putting us into a separate world like VR is. Does anyone remember the hit game Pokemon Go that like blew up a few years ago? That's a really good example of AR, because you'd be on your phone, you'd walk around and see the world around you through your camera, but then these little Pokemon would pop up and you try to catch them. So that's a really good example of what AR is. And then this photo to the right is an example of an AR app that was at the Field Museum for Sue, the T-Rex. You could hold your phone up to the skeleton of Sue and it would overlay, what she might have looked like in the flesh. So kind of gives you that visual. So quick recap of our three topics. AI, the ability of a computer to perform tasks that are traditionally thought to require human intelligence, like problem solving. AR is more smartphone oriented, alters the real world environment that you're with information overlaid on top of it. And then VR is this totally artificial environment. So both AR and VR utilize a variety of hardware, everything from specifically made goggles and headsets to your cell phone. These come in a variety of price points, and later we'll share a few low-cost ideas for integrating AR into museums. But because AR has a lower barrier for entry, both from a production perspective and user perspective, that'll be our focus today.
So how can these technologies be applied in Alaska museums? Like I said before, we're going to focus on generative AI like ChatGPT, and there are a ton of different uses that you could have in museum settings or beyond, and they're ever expanding. Here's our list. This is based on brainstorming conversations that Alex and I had together with colleagues at the Anchorage Museum and also from reading articles about what's going on in the museum field. Some ideas. You could treat it like a research assistant. It can help to synthesize information. It can do preliminary research for exhibitions or other projects that you're thinking about. It can act as a copy editor to change the tone of your writing. So say you have an idea of what you want to do. It's not quite polished yet. AI can pop out something polished that you can then work on to make it more of the tone that you're trying to go for. And with that in mind, it can also help with uniformity and consistency of voice if you have a lot of different people working on a single project. It can also be a muscled up thesaurus for phrases rather than just single words like you might get in a thesaurus. It can help with content creation by suggesting images or text. We have not done this, but there are people who use it to suggest first draft checklists based on museum collection or a focus area that they've told AI that they would like to look into in their collection. And it's even thought that it might be able to help create audio guides. It can do translation work. So say you have your text that's on your website, you want people to be able to click different languages, it will automatically translate it on the website for you. And it also has lots of back of house applications such as data analysis and recommendations. You could use it to clean up a database. It can help with code writing and website building.
So like with any project that you're going to undergo, you first need to really consider like, what is the goal of using this technology? Whether it's for efficiency, compensating for missing expertise you might have at your institution, or filling gaps in knowledge or capacity. But there are definitely a lot of things to consider when thinking about AI. This is still an emerging tool that people are experimenting with, but in the future, this will likely be embedded in our everyday lives. Don't assume that it is the definitive expert on a subject. AI can make detailed recommendations, but always review what is produced. Assume there will be inaccuracies, and definitely be aware of bias, which we'll mention here in a little bit. Lisa did a great demonstration yesterday with her keynote when she asked ChatGPT a few questions and noted that it doesn't give every nuance, encouraging us to consider what might be missing from those responses. Details and specifics are very important in prompt writing and assisting the AI bot to generate a useful response. Your answer is only good as the prompt you write. So as you're experimenting more with AI, you really have to learn how to write these prompts to get what you're looking out of it, what you're looking for out of it. And then give feedback to your AI. So if you aren't getting what you want, don't be afraid to like tinker with that prompt that you had to really get what you want out of it. And that's also going to help train the AI bot to work a little bit better too.
This is when Alex and I were divvying up who spoke. This is the part she landed on. This is not me pushing back on what Alex said, but I wanted to mention here, I have concerns about AI. I feel like I've gone to school and I've worked really hard to have the knowledge that I have to be able to speak about things, how I speak about them. And I worry that it is going to dumb down society. And I had a conversation with someone and they very interestingly said that they think it actually encourages critical thinking because you have to be creative in how you build these responses. You need to look at what AI is putting out and think about what it has given you, what it hasn't given you, and how you can adjust that prompt back to it. So I'm putting that out there. If any of you are also concerned like me, oh, hey, Lisa, I didn't see you there. You got some shout outs. If you're concerned like me, think of it also from a creative writing perspective of you're engaging and going back and forth with this AI bot.
So when using an AI bot, it's also important to remember that if you're using these like large public AI tools, that the information that you give it is somehow being stored somewhere. So if you have sensitive material, maybe don't put it into an AI bot. And yeah, just really think about like where that data might end up and how it might be used in the future for other AI prompts. Rachel mentioned earlier, it's important to have an AI policy for your institution, especially as these things are coming up. This helps ensure that these tools are being integrated smoothly with your current museum systems. And then it's also important to provide staff training for effective use. And then also, it's important to consider the public perception and maintain transparency about when you're using AI. If you're using AI to write everything, feels kind of disingenuous, and maybe you want to like have a disclosure that you are using AI to do these things, just to keep that transparent. And I'll talk about an AI institution a little bit, or an AI policy a little bit in a few slides. And then also on the note of like an AI versus a consultant. So AI can do a lot, but it can't properly analyze data. It does not have years of professional experience. You still need to analyze the information that AI produces, but using these tools can make your work more efficient. So if you don't have the budget or time to hire someone, it can help. But that human element is really important, and we're definitely not advocating for AI to replace anyone. So.
All right, we're going to do some tool recommendations and demonstrations right now. There are a lot of different AI tools out there. You can see on this graph on your right, there are different levels, different types, from video to design to coding. In the curatorial department, we use Notion, which is that first one on the left under productivity, third down. Interestingly, we don't use any of the AI features on Notion, so we're curious to look into that. As I was typing up the script with Alex, there was a flashing button on the bottom right of the Notion page, which is where we've kept our notes, and it kept inviting us to summarize this page. So we're going to do that as our final slide. Pay attention to what we're saying so you can see if AI's summary of our script is actually what we told you. All right, live demo number 1. We're going to check out ChatGPT. Here. So over here, we're on ChatGPT. Currently, you do not need to have a login to use it, which I kind of like. It's not linked to me. So I'm going to select stay logged out. We're going to go down here to message ChatGPT, and I'm going to ask it to write a visitor evaluation for a museum exhibition. You can see it just starts pumping things out. So it gives you the option to do 5 out of 5 stars. It goes over exhibition content, presentation, staff interaction, accessibility, highlights, suggestions for improvements, overall impression. Would you visit again? Any additional comments? And say we're like, oh, you know what? This is all fine and great, but I want to cut this down to 5 questions that are focused on, wow, it is hard to type for a group of people. Evaluating learning outcomes and engagement. So I just push enter and it says sure. And then it gives these 5 things. And then say, I want to turn this into a Google form because that's how we've decided that we're going to do the visitor evaluations in the gallery. So you would say, help me turn this into a Google form.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, can you make the get a little bit bigger? I just
Ooh,
have bad vision and can't
yes.
read it.
Hold on.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thank you for asking for that. So let me just scroll back up to the top. So we said up here, write a visitor evaluation. It gave us all of this. I know I'm scrolling quickly, apologies. Then I said, cut it down to 5 questions. And it said, sure, here are 5. In case we're curious, which I think that you probably are, Gina. It says, what new knowledge or insights did you gain from the exhibition? How engaging did you find the interactive elements? Did the exhibition encourage you to think critically about the themes presented? If so, how? How effectively did the exhibition facilitate your understanding of the historical context? Would you recommend this exhibition to others for its educational value? Why or why not? It took away the 5 out of 5 stars, so you would need to think if you want to reincorporate that. And then I said, help me turn this into a Google form. And it says, sure, here you go. And it gives the step-by-step examples of how to go through and add this in. tells you whether you should do multiple choice, whether you need to add for a paragraph explanation. And interestingly, when we've done this before, it actually says, click on this, click on this, click on this. So it has stopped recommending that to us. All right, the next thing that we're going to demonstrate. Oh, actually, we wanted to do one more silly thing here. Let me go back to this. So we checked out ChatGPT. Now we're going to ask it to do something in the voice of Jeff Goldblum. All right, here we are. So you can just go up here, click on this pencil. It starts a whole new message. And we're going to say, I am nervous for a presentation. Give me a 1-paragraph pep talk in the voice of Jeff Goldblum. And hopefully I don't have any typos in there.
You do.
Oh, give. Thank you.
It'll pick it up anyway.
Ah, my friend. Let's take a moment to revel in the delightful, thrilling experience that is about to unfold. So it can do a bunch of different things. It doesn't always need to be specific to the work that you're doing. But we're now going to look at elicit, and I will pass it over to Helen.
Can you all see this? Is this? No, okay. Is that a little better?
No, did someone say?
Well, we do need some space to show things, so I think this will be the furthest we can go. So this is Elicit. This is a really great research assistant for if you're trying to like tackle a research topic and you want a good starting point to go. So I think for the sake of time, we'll use this example here. If we wanted to research caribou in Alaska, we would click that, and what happens is it gives you a summary of the top 4 papers in that field. It's loading a second. And then underneath, it'll show the list of papers that it recommends for you. So there's our summary. If we go down and look at these topics of these papers, the first one is about herd size distribution, harvest management issues. The next one is population dynamics. Sea ice crossing by migrating caribou. So it's kind of all over the place. Let's say we want to further refine this, and we're going to do caribou herd migration in Alaska. Click enter. It's going to think a minute.
Where is it getting the papers?
It's pulling from all the databases that are public access. Well, actually, just if you were to use like Semantic Scholar or JSTOR, it's going to pull from anything where these papers are public. It will pull papers that you may not have access to, or you have to have institutional access to log into it. But it does give you a really good list of those initial starters. So now, thank you. These topics definitely relate more to the migration patterns, talking about seasonal movements, modeling caribou movements, and you can even go further and further if we wanted to look at like the human impact with this, or you can keep refining and refining to like really get at what you want and look at all of these papers and start to really like get a good place for that research foundation. We'll do this as a demo at the end if you want to come play around with it as well.
So you don't have to input data for this one? With ChatGPT, you do have to input data.
You did have to input data in the sense that data, I guess, prompt. So the difference between prompt and data, a prompt is where you're asking AI to go out and look for answers to the question. We did not upload any data to the ChatGPT. When we talk about data, that would be like if you have an Excel document that has information that you want it to synthesize or that you want it to focus on. This is kind of similar to a Google search, where it's just looking at all the different information that is out there. For elicit, it's specific to scholarly articles.
Okay. The ChatGPT, you can put stuff in, but elicit, you don't put stuff in.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Let's get back to old Jeffy. Actually, we're still going to talk about other ideas. I'll just do this one. So some other things that you could use AI for in a museum setting. We aren't doing these, but other institutions are. You can take an image and generate text about it, for example. You can use it as a translator where you scan a QR code and then it'll take you to the website that's preloaded with the text and you can choose which language you want to read it in. There are a lot of uses with character recognition, and it can be used for anything from handwriting to digital content. For example, you could digitize a bunch of handwritten postcards, pop it into an AI bot, and it can categorize them. You could also upload a collection with the knowledge that you would be putting it out there for public to see, but you could upload a collection to generate metadata with certain tags based on what you're looking for in there. You just give it the output format that you would like it to have. We mentioned before that ChatGPT is not confidential. There are ways to run a system locally, but you would need a lot of coding to do that. So always keep in mind how the content that you are sharing is then out there in the public. Archives are typically private and local, so something like ChatGPT is not going to be a good way to use with that type of privileged content. And we also want to emphasize you always need to review what AI produces. On to AR. A quick recap, it is adding layers to the world that you see around you. It's typically done with a smartphone or a tablet. There are a couple of different types of AR. There is marker AR, which uses some sort of QR code to trigger virtual content on a device. This is usually done with advertising. There's location-based AR, which uses your device's GPS location or compass to place virtual objects in the world around you, like Pokemon Go. And there's overlay AR, which recognizes an object or an image that's out in the real world, and then it overlays a virtual image onto the physical space. That could be a flat image, it could be a video, it could be a 3D object, which you're then able to rotate on your tablet. We really like this quote from a Museum Next article. Augmented reality is a transformative technology that overlays digital information, images, text, or sound onto the physical world, enriching our perception of our surroundings. Enriching is the key word here. It's a nice way of thinking about AR in the museum context. It enhances or adds to what you're already seeing. So it's a great way to provide additional information through another visual format in the gallery. Here are a couple of uses. It can add context. It's an opportunity to add context to the cultural belonging or items in your collection in a novel way. It adds more information than you might be able to fit into a label, or perhaps it adds a different view of that object than what people are seeing in the gallery. It allows us to expand the stories that we're telling, adding new perspectives to familiar pieces. And you can also think about it as a way to enhance a visitor's experience. It's interactive, it's multi-sensory, it keeps their attention for longer than a piece on a wall might. We've all heard the terrifying stat that museum visitors spend an average of just 8 seconds per piece as they're going through our museum. So this is a nice way to invite them to pause and spend more time with something. And it's active rather than passive learning. Also, museums are always thinking strategically about how to expand their audiences. We think that AR is a really great way to invite in new audiences who might be excited about a new technology, or to introduce that technology to audiences who aren't already familiar with it. Some considerations to keep in mind. What's the goal of using the technology? It should always be strategic. Never do it just for the sake of using the technology. With that in mind, though, sometimes simple is better, so don't do it just because you can. AR-driven exhibitions should be engaging and intuitive. It should enhance the visitor experience rather than complicate it. So don't make something that's overly distracting. Do you start with the technology or do you start with the object? There's no one right way. It depends on the situation. But think about that before you go into starting your project, because it's ultimately going to impact the result and the process of getting that result. How many AR moments is too many AR moments? Don't overwhelm the visitor with engagement options that distract them. It should be a little bonus that enhances, and that line is always going to be different for each institution. Some technology considerations. Like Alex said before, AR is more accessible in a museum setting than VR, both from a visitor perspective and from a museum perspective. AR is a lower cost of entry for museums, and it also requires fewer devices for a visitor that's going to be there. You don't have to create a separate sensory environment with AR. You just overlay content onto the environment or the artwork that's already in the gallery. And also keep in mind that certain technologies have an age limit. So as you're researching, look into that. Also, some things like virtual reality need to be facilitated. So do you have the staff capacity to have someone in the gallery the entire time, helping people to engage with that interactive? Keep the AR content private on the back end. What I mean by that is if you have created an application or you're using one of the existing applications, you've uploaded all of your content onto there, make sure that it's locked. Don't let other people get into there. It should be a private experience where you control what is augmented in the gallery, because people can come in and mess with things. You want to make sure that if you have an iPad that's in the gallery, the visitors are only able to access that one application or that one AR moment. There are lots of ways to keep people from getting into different parts of it, and they can mess with your technology or worse. And then also think about who is generating the way that people access that AR. So you can't really see it on the walls over there, but the way that we introduce AR in galleries is with a QR code that people can scan so that they are able to bring it up onto their own phone, or they can use an iPad that we provide. So if you are generating that QR code, make sure you know how long it lasts. If someone else is generating it for you, make sure that it's not going to expire, because that could be a real pain in the butt down the road. Something else to think about is in-house versus artist-generated content. And it comes down a little bit to how much time do you have and how much do you want to control the overall experience. If it's produced by a museum, you'll have the account. You can track how often AR is used, how many people have downloaded something onto their phone. Also, you need to think about whether you are altering an artist's work. If you are the one that's doing it in-house, the artist would need to be part of that conversation. For museums, it's about creating an interesting, novel experience that integrates technology. But from an artist perspective, it could be a way for them to share something beyond the artwork that's hung on the wall. It could be that the artwork is part of a larger series and they want to convey that. Maybe the artist wants to be able to tell certain stories that animate the artwork. So an example that we have is comic illustrator and augmented reality artist Nathan Schaefer. He's based out of Anchorage, and he currently has artwork on view at the Anchorage Museum. He says that he likes to use AR because it's a look at what's possible. It mixes reality and alternative realities, lived and shared realities that allow him to connect individual pieces of art to his larger comic multiverse. Okay.
So now you've decided at your institution you want to implement some AR, augmented reality, in your gallery. Some things to consider as you're setting that up. So what does the installation look like? How does the visitor experience the interactive? Where are you going to place it in the wall or on the wall or in the gallery? Make sure you have text instructions to guide visitors who may not be familiar with the technology. Think about how that augmented interactive is called out visually. Be clear if you're not doing something on the wall. You just want to make sure you're being really clear with your visitors on how to use things so they're not confused and think it's broken and it's not working in a way that doesn't explicitly call that out. In terms of accessibility, if you're expecting your visitor to pull up something on their own phone, do you have Wi-Fi? Are they going to be using cell data? And in that case, is there reception in the gallery? If they are using their personal smartphone, you want to make sure that they're set up to succeed and not to fail. But if you are providing an iPad or a smartphone, for them to do that by scanning that QR code or getting it going, you just want to make sure that your visitors have the best user experience possible. Other things, like if you have an iPad, the cord is going to be able to reach to the art, like thinking about just those logistics as well. One of the biggest challenges that our team has talked about is like setting it up in general, making sure the iPad is secured. It's not gonna walk away from your museum or the exhibition. Make sure it has power, make sure the software works without and runs without bugs. Is it gonna be on a shelf, on the wall? Is it gonna be on a pedestal? These are all things to consider in just how that user is going to interact with it. If there is going to be sound, are you going to provide headphones with that? Is it going to be transportable? Can people listen to it on their phone and not interrupt others in the gallery? Ultimately, the goal is to have the lowest barrier to entry, and making sure that that user experience will work out.
I'm going to very quickly give some examples of how we thought about this for an upcoming exhibition. Here are 4 different artworks that we considered using augmented reality within the museum. So first one is a postcard. We knew that we wanted to show the front of postcards, but there was also information on the back. We were like, hey, that'd be really cool if people could hold up a phone and then they'd see the back of the postcard. Second is an artwork that we have in the Anchorage Museum collection. It's part of a series, so we considered, is there a way that we could show multiple pieces from that alongside it so that people can have the full picture? Another option is Rico Whirl's gummy bears that this is a group of them, but we have in the exhibition, there will be 3 that are based on particular berries that you can find in Southeast Alaska. And we thought it would be really cool if somehow there was like an animation where you could see the actual berry that's growing near the bear. And then the last thing on the far end, Dan Giroux has this lovely painting of Mount McKinley as the title scene from the Grand Canal Rialto Bridge. And I thought it would be kind of funny if we animated it and had those icebergs that were bobbing along, just to get people thinking about how this could be a real scene. Ultimately, we decided to go with the lowest effort one in the sense that it's a test run still. We're seeing how we can integrate this into the museum. It required the fewest players in the conversation, and we went with the postcards. This is how the display is ultimately going to look. There on the bottom left is a pedestal where the iPad will stand. And then this first wooden wall is all of the augmented postcards. So people will be able to hold up the iPad and experience the back of them. And we'll have that demo on the right over there that you can experience live after this. There are a couple of different tool recommendations that we can say. iJack is what we're using. It's because you don't need to pay to use it. To have an account, you do need to pay a monthly fee that is very low. We feel it is $10 per month and up to 10,000 views, which we would be hard pressed to go beyond. It's free to download both for the museum and for visitors who are coming in. It's designed to share a video animation, so you can have this content that pops up as you hold up the phone to the artwork that's on the wall. I was going to go into the back end process of it, but we're tight on time, so if you'd like to know more, come chat. But essentially, you have the artwork, you have the file that you want to pop up as you look to it, and you just pair them in the system. And then some practical applications for how, also another recommendation is eighth wall. That's something that we've heard artists use a lot. It was a little bit more complicated. I think it had a higher cost, and most importantly, it required visitors to go to a web browser to use it. And we just wanted to avoid having that extra step for folks. Some practical applications of AR. You can use it as a fancier version of an audio tour. So instead of something that you just hold to your ears as you walk through, perhaps people go through, they look at an artwork and a Rachel pops up next to the artwork and talks out at them instead of me just talking into their ear. Another idea is you could work with a living artist to animate their artwork. So Nathan Schaefer is a great example of that, and we will have some of his drawings there for you to check out after this. It's a way of identifying elements of an artwork without a diagram on a wall. So I think a lot of different museums do that to expand what the particular artwork is and to explain different parts of it. This could instead be a video where people watch it and each different piece is identified and verbally explained. It can share 3D models, as I mentioned before, so that you could rotate something that you're only able to see one side of in a case. And also, it expands on labels. So say you don't have enough room to say everything that you want to in a label, which I think lots of us have been at before. It allows you to expand on that story. An example perhaps is maybe you want to go into the materials that are used. Typically materials are a single line on that tombstone that's at the top of the label. If you wanted to use AR, you could go into what each of the materials are, where it grows, show an image of what it looks like out in the wild. Over to Alex for ethics.
All right, like anything we deal with in museums, ethics are a super critical part of that. I am gonna have to gloss through some of this, but I would love to chat with people more after if they have more specific questions. So I'll touch on both AI and AR, do some examples, and then we're gonna get to our live demos. So AI, we mentioned bias before. So when AI is pulling all of these documents from these different sources, those sources are not necessarily being like checked to see how appropriate they are. So you could have issues with outdated language or just inappropriate words or culturally insensitive things that get pulled into that. So it's really important to check that work and make sure that you're not including any of that bias in the results that whatever you're using that AI for. Bias usually amplify negative stereotypes. They often exclude non-white perspectives. So just be aware that that is an issue when using AI. Privacy, as we've mentioned a few times, anything you put in, so like doing a prompt, you know, it's like a Google search, if you will, but if you're actually inputting data to be organized or something, just know that that data is going somewhere and it's not private unless you have like a more localized system, which does take more coding and work to like make that on the back end, but might be worth it if you're really looking to like get a lot out of that AI. And then just like our general ethical responsibility, just because you can use it doesn't mean you should. And especially if it's competing with someone's job or career, really think about that human factor in your work. But if you need the assistance, great, just keep that in mind. And then from an environmental perspective, data, there's a lot of data about the energy used in AI. It's a very incredibly energy heavy process. And it does take a toll on the environment in some ways or another. An AI-powered search engine uses 10 times the amount of energy that a regular search uses. And generating one AI image is equivalent to charging your iPhone for an entire day. This graphic came out recently in the New York Post? Washington Post, okay. But it's basically saying that a 100-word email generated by an AI chatbot one time requires 1 bottle of water. If you're doing that once weekly for a year, it would be 1.43 water cooler jugs. Once weekly for a year for 1 out of 10 working Americans, which is about 16 million people, is all the water consumed in Rhode Island households in 1.5 days. So the more we're using this, the more we're using water and other environmental things, that it's just going to take a toll. So just be mindful of how you are using it. So we've mentioned AI institutional policies a few times. My colleague John Hagan and I worked on drafting an AI policy that we're going to use in our curatorial department. And it's important to just think about, you know, how does AI fit into your own work? So we really centered it in our mission and our vision and our sustainability goals to make sure that it's still in line with that. And then we just had, in addition to a list of resources about AI and AI use, just thinking about things that it can and should be used for versus things that it maybe should not be used for at your institution. And this is a living document since the technology is still, you know, changing with time, so should your document. Happy to chat about this more later too. So when thinking about augmented reality and just bringing in your collection with these technologies, there's a lot more nuances and ethical considerations that you have to make. Really consider whose heritage you're displaying and if you have the right to display that heritage. The more visual you get with technology, you can get into issues of intellectual property rights. and issues with Indigenous data sovereignty, Indigenous data governance. So be really mindful of what you have in your collection, what might work best, and what might not. So a lot of this research has come out of a collaborative NSF project that I've been involved in for the last 5 years, collaborative research, ethical considerations, and three-dimensional digitization of Indigenous heritage, which is led by Maida Chova Dihas and a team of both Indigenous and non-Indigenous scholars, museum professionals, and practitioners that look at the ethics and propose best practices for documenting Indigenous cultural heritage digitally. And so we follow the Indigenous data sovereignty and Indigenous data governance principles, while also thinking about the fair and care principles of data as well. There's some QR codes down there if you want to check out what both of those mean. It's important to know if you're not already aware and you do have Indigenous collections in your, or Indigenous belongings in your collections. So just as a quick visual example, I pulled a few pictures of belongings from our Alaska exhibition at the Anchorage Museum to kind of talk through like how you might reason through what could or should not be augmented through AR. So this is a cradle. It's Han Athabaskan from 1900. So because it's older, you probably don't have and it does not have an identified artist. It's best to consult with that community, collaborate with that community to see if it would be something that they would want to see and how you can like make a project out of that collaboratively rather than just doing it. We have 3 masks here. The first 2 are also circa 1900. One is from lower Yukon River. The other is Alutiiq. These, again, since they don't have an identified artist, they're older, it would be best to work with the communities to see if that is something that they would want to have a digital, representation of those belongings be made. However, the third mask, it does have an identified artist, Jack Hudson. If he is still alive, so it was made in 1992, it might be worth having a conversation with him or someone close to him. If he is not with us, just to have a conversation to see if that would be, something that they would be interested in. So it's really about having conversations and finding out, what people want. Just because it's in your collection does not mean you should do it just to do it. Whereas you have this miner's cap, this is from 1930, but it is, it's part of the museum's permanent collection. It's a historical artifact. This could be a really good candidate for doing some kind of AR project because of the lack of connection to a specific community. And then the final example, Howard Rock's typewriter. While this is a historical object, it does have a connection to Howard Rock, but because it's on loan from the Inupiaq Corporation, it would be best practice to reach out to the loaning institution to see if it's something they would be interested in. So really what it boils down to is having conversations with your collections department or those who are really intimate with your collection to really talk about like what works and what doesn't work. And then just a quick visual, the yellow lights, slow down, have conversations. If it's anything that's connected to communities, make sure you're having those conversations, but definitely red light stop, hard stop on anything that's culturally sensitive, restricted, copyright, things like that. So just keep that in mind as you are trying to do these AR things.
All right, folks, somehow we thought we weren't going to be able to fill an hour and we have 2 minutes left. So we're going to jump through these real quick, get to our conclusion notes. Some next steps to have in mind if you're thinking about this. Meet as a team and brainstorm ideas. Include everyone. I know that we have colleagues here at the Anchorage Museum. These are Alex and Rachel ideas. They're not ideas that are being discussed at a larger level. So sit down with people. It can be a small team, it can be the full museum staff. Do not assume that AR and AI can only benefit your department. There are so many different areas out there. Prioritize the ideas that meet your mission and would add value, either from a staff perspective or a visitor perspective. Consider which types of technologies are going to work best for your institution and your project, and start small. You don't have to go out with a bang. It can be postcards, like the example that we have over here. We're gonna ignore the summarize and hop over to in-person demos. So on the right over here, we have postcards that are from an upcoming exhibition. These are just reproductions. We'll have 2 iPads if you want to play around with this. On the left are drawings by Nathan Schaefer that are in our current exhibition, Lines of Sight, Comic Art Storytelling in Alaska. And if you would like to use a water bottle's worth of energy, you can play around with Elicit and ChatGPT on our laptops up here. There are a number of people at the museum who helped us out with this, so thank you very much to this whole list. To Dixie, Museums Alaska, I'm Rachel, this is Alex. We'll leave this up here. It's 10 o'clock, 9:59. So feel free to ask questions. We can answer from up here. I'm going to step over, get those iPads ready, and please come play around if you'd like, or leave if you need to at 10 a.m. Thank you, everyone.